Hello, I'm Dr. E.W. Manuel, President of the Medical Society of the District of Columbia. Welcome to Washington's Healthcare on Wednesday, also known as WOW, MSDC weekly program devoted to informing and connecting the Washington, D.C. physician community. This month is National Women's Month, and we celebrate Women's History Month to remind ourselves of the many accomplishments women have made throughout the year. It is a time to reflect and remind ourselves and others on the trailblazing women who have led the way for change. Today, we have Dr. Anna Zelivianska, who is a fellow at Washington Hospital Center. Tell us a little about yourself, Doctor.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure. Thank you for the quick introduction, for the background. As you said, I'm currently a fellow in minimally invasive gynecologic surgery at MedStar Washington Hospital Center. And in June of last year, I graduated from OBGYN residency at MedStar. The residency is, of course, 4 years. And prior to that, I was in Chicago for most of my training, college and medical school. But I was actually born in Moscow, Russia, and also lived in Nebraska for 6 years. So have covered quite a bit of land there, but I love DC now.
Good. That's a rich background. So tell us, what made you go to medical school?
Well, I had kind of always thought that something in the medical and science field was going to be my career. We have several physicians and several scientists in the family. And before I started college at University of Chicago, I looked through the course catalog and tried to find some other major I was interested in besides biology, and did not succeed. But actually in my third year of college, I became really interested in more of the health policy and anthropology side of the medical field. I studied abroad in Paris for studying anthropology. And that really opened my eyes up to medical anthropology and the breadth of the field and how extensive the complexities of it are. Really can't be solved by science alone. And I think it's this human connection and all the other socioeconomic and anthropologic and policy aspects that really drew me to medicine and made me feel at home in this career.
Oh, did you feel like it was a fit for you?
I did. I definitely did. I actually got involved in community health and policy pretty early on in college through a nonprofit organization that I volunteered with. And so I had seen the many facets of medicine and really felt like it was the career that I most enjoyed that allowed me to make a difference. Certainly by no means the only career that you can make an impact with, but for me, it really brought together the academic challenges, the technical challenges of working with your hands, the human aspects, and all these socioeconomic factors that go into providing healthcare and good health.
Okay, let's talk about medical school. How many women were in your class? How many began, if you can remember, and how many graduated?
Well, I went to University of Chicago, or excuse me, University of Illinois at Chicago for medical school. And my class was actually pretty equal. It was pretty close to 50-50. We were a big class. So I don't remember, we were definitely over 100. So I don't remember the exact breakdown, but it was pretty uniform. So that actually was great to see because of course we all know about the challenges of being a female in medicine. But, you know, UIC definitely had diversity from the gender aspect. But I think where you really see the difference is when you're looking at the specialties that women want to go with and want to go into and do go into. You know, for example, there were very few orthopedic surgeons or of course, the gap in general surgery, for example, I did anecdotally felt like was closing because there were a little bit more women going in every year, but there still remain traditionally women heavy and men heavy fields. And of course, I'm an OBGYN, which has, in the last several decades kind of been overtaken by women. But then you look at the surgical subspecialties, and there's still quite a few men when you continue down the line.
Do you find that women who go into OBGYN have added a little bit more understanding to the field, the profession? It was, as you said, heavily dominated by men in the past. Do you think women have made a change?
Absolutely. There's no such thing as women's health and men's health. And that is one of the other main factors that drew me to a career in medicine, because we speak of women's health, but I think that the purpose of that phrase is to draw attention to the way that women have been neglected in the healthcare fields. When you look at the history of medicine and even the history of gynecology, right? You look historically, and we go back to Lucy Sims and Henrietta Lacks and the many other women that have built the foundations of our field, and yet they themselves did not receive quality health care while they were alive. I mean, not even close. But then the pattern continued for so long, the pattern of marginalization. And how can women be treated as equal and receive quality health care when the people that are supposed to serve them don't look like them, right? Have no conception of the female physiology. And I think that only recently, when you look at the big spectrum of history, have we started to recognize not the differences, I would say, but the different ways that we need to provide care for women, so that every gender can have equal health care, right? And now we extend it not only to women, but to, the vast categories of transgender and questioning. We should not be limiting healthcare to women's health or men's health, etc.
Do you feel that there were barriers, whether consciously or unconsciously, that you had to break down because of your gender?
Yes, I think that every woman experiences challenges in her career, but I think that it would be optimistic to say that they are broken down. I think that there have been many experiences of both conscious and unconscious bias. For me personally, it still continues that a lot of the time when I walk into a patient's room or another room in the hospital, the automatic assumption is that I am not a doctor. There have also been instances in my career when there have been various attitudes towards me from other staff interactions, and from anything from not handing me the instruments I asked for in the operating room to taking feedback as negative rather than educational because it's coming from a woman. I have also been asked about my family planning intentions at various interviews throughout my career, but that is also nothing compared to what I have seen other women go through, from fighting for every day of their 6 weeks maternity leave to being passed over for jobs because they're of reproductive age, not even pregnant. So it continues to happen. But I would say that we certainly have not broken down these barriers, but we need more women to stand up and speak about them so that this culture changes. It's not a one-time or a succinct process for any person.
Interesting that you said that. You are the third, but not last, woman that I'm interviewing for National Women's Month, History Month, I should say. And I strategically chose different women at different times in their career. So you are my early career physician. And I would like to say, what do you think it's like for you now compared to a woman who is at the middle of her career versus towards the end? What changes that you have heard, that you have seen, or that you would like to see have occurred?
I am definitely optimistic at this point in my career, which I hope will not change. But I have definitely seen a big difference from in what I've experienced compared to hearing women who are older and wiser than me talk about their experience as female physicians. I mean, of course, many physicians have the story that they were the only female in their medical class, that they did residency at a time when it was a whole different ballgame. And, of course, I'm overjoyed that my medical school class was half women, and that, of course, I have gotten the benefit of being in a now women heavy specialty where, our unique challenges are more easily and more often talked about, right? But I would say that if, I in my current roles, I have tried to, be as much of a leader as I can, in the various activities and organizations that I've participated with, and I do hope that that will continue, right? And I'm so early in my professional career that I think what worries me is looking forward and looking at how few women there are still in leadership positions, right? So it's not just about being somewhere on the map. It's about what role models do I have in terms of the higher up leadership positions. And when you look at the amount of women that are climbing these ladders, there's just drop off at every step, right? So there are many surveys out there that demonstrate that women are much less likely to be hired for and remain in leadership positions of large institutions, hospitals, organizations, etc., right? So where is that? Where is the gap? How else can we still make up this gap in equality?
What do you think your role will be? Obviously, you're accomplished, you've completed your residency, you moved on to fellowship. What role do you have?
Well, I think that a lot of it has to do with just speaking up as loud and as often as possible, right? I mean, you really have to say say things aloud and frequently for people to notice. And this is how a lot of women got to where they are. I think that the value of networking and finding and being those kinds of role models has been elevated in importance, over the last several years, decades. So, on the subject of women in more senior positions, there was an interesting survey that came out in conjunction with the American Medical Society, and it was actually spearheaded by Dr. Kim Templeton, who is an orthopedic surgeon and who was also past president of the American Medical Women's Association. And she looked at, it was targeted towards women in medicine who are over 60 and what their perceived challenges are now, and how they had felt when they were younger in their young careers. And it was really insightful because still with senior women, over 50% of them felt professional isolation. But when they started their careers, 76% of them felt professionally isolated. So the good news is that there is more networking and more solidarity, right? And perhaps it's not just an age thing, but a trend in the attitudes, nationally and internationally. The rise of and the prominence of organizations for female physicians, such as the International Women's Association and the American Medical Women's Association, other organizations that are now targeting, the very specific categories, whether it's minority physicians or female physicians, et cetera, or even just young physicians, starting out their careers. I think that these activities, these targets, they help people come together and not only find role models, but just normalize what they're experiencing and highlight what we still need to change. So I think that one of my most important roles is continue speaking out, continuing and to participate in medical organizations, as well as building connections on a local level, so that we continue to have this close partnership and circle of support.
I will say to you, I believe that the medical society has, we have ways to go. I think we definitely have more women representative. But I also sometimes wonder and would like to ask you, where are the gaps? Where do we need to close as a profession, as a young physician starting out? What gaps need to be closed?
Well, the pay gap for starters, right? But I mean, so there is some objective information and data on the specific inequalities between men and women in medicine. The fact that, of course, and in any fields, right? I mean, I may be mistaken, but I can't think off the top of my head of a single field where the pay is equal. And there's also, with that background, women tend to work more hours, and they still continue to be passed over for leadership positions. So I think that finding more programs of sponsorship rather than just mentorship, which I think is what is kind of the new hype now, which is great. And I by no means mean to minimize the value that mentorship and just having role models that you can look up to provides. But there is also sponsorship, which I think is very little talked about in medicine. And sponsorship is where you have somebody or even multiple people who try to highlight you for positions, for achievements. They find research projects or articles or awards that you can apply to, or funds you can apply to, or positions you can run, right? And that's different from mentorship, where you're just guided and supported and given advice. So I think that is one area that we can specifically focus on. So I think that these are just some bits, and really the starting fertile grounds. But I certainly can't answer that question for women as a whole. I think that one of the gaps is knowing that everybody is so different, and really trying to listen and gather more information on what the unique challenges are that women are facing at various stages of their careers.
I would agree with you. I think we've come a far way. I think now many organizations, not all, have recognized that women require some recognition that in order to be productive, they have to be allowed to do certain things that allows them to be women, mothers, nurturers, educators. I think recently, I was informed of at jobs, they requiring certain electronics not to be present at work. One of them is having your own refrigerator, in which it came across my mind, wow, that's such a strong institutional man point of view. If we want women to be productive at work and they have a young child at home and they're pumping, they need a place to store the breast milk so that it remains fresh for their infant. And so I think there are many different moments. That's a moment of learning, an opportunity in which we can correct some of these structural situations that prevent our doctors or not, I should say, women in general, to be more productive at work. This was very enlightening.
And there's not even a federal requirement that you have a place dedicated to lactation in a workplace, right?
Yes.
I mean, think about if men were breastfeeding, that would have been solved decades ago. But I think it's also this mindset that we have to make the workplace and the medical field more female friendly, but really it's about recognizing that the perspective that this is only designed for men was never correct in the first place. It's not that we have to modify the workplaces to make it friendly to this whole other gender that is now has involved itself in this field. It's about the fact that this shouldn't have been structured that way from the beginning.
Yeah, I would agree. This was very enlightening. And I thank you for your time. I thank you for your wisdom. And I thank you for all that you do. And I hope that you enjoyed this discussion.
It was wonderful. It was a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you very much. For more information about our Physicians Health Program, for more information about more information on our Washington Healthcare on Wednesday. For our committees, please visit us at msdc.org. And thank you again for joining us. So Anna, thank you very much.